Bolivians rally against recently arrested former interim president Añez. CARICOM has been allocated 1.8 million COVID-19 vaccines through the African Medical Supplies Platform. And the UK police is under fire for cracking down on a vigil for murdered women. Hello and welcome to teleSUR English. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez in Quito, Ecuador, and this is from the south. Bolivians have rallied outside the building of the country's special force for the fight against crime, where former interim president Añez is being held following her arrest. Shouting justice, La Paz residents have demanded that Añez be punished for participating in a coup that ousted former President Evo Morales. Añez was arrested Saturday on terrorism and sedition charges over the 2019 coup. Police were also rounding up for former ministers who backed the conservative politician's government, including Añez's foreign energy minister, Rodrigo Guzman, and former justice minister, Álvaro Coimbra.
We are asking for justice. We want a maximum penalty because there have been deaths. People have been injured and are still suffering in hospitals.
CARICOM has been allocated 1.8 million COVID-19 vaccines through the African Medical Supplies Platform to distribute among the Caribbean nations. Barbados Foreign Minister Dr. Jerome Walcott said that his country is slated to be allocated 56,000 vaccines via this platform. Trinidad and Tobago also signed up to this initiative. TNT Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley announced that the Twin Island nation has secured 226,000 vaccines thanks to this offer. Former Peruvian President Martín Vizcarra has claimed foul play against his new candidacy for Congress after a prosecutor requests preventive prison for him. A prosecutor asked for 18 months of preventive prison for Vizcarra for allegedly taking bribes while he was a governor. A court in Lima is set to analyze this request. The former president is being investigated for allegedly accepting bribes of around $619,000 that he received from two local construction companies while he was a governor of the Moquegua region from 2011 to 2014. Last November, Vizcarra was removed from the presidency by Parliament, which used the prosecutor's investigation as the main argument.
Less than a month before elections, someone asks for preemptive prison against a candidate of a party, which is the first option for Congress. As you have seen in the polls, I have walked all Lima since March 1st, and we have received an enormous support by the population.
Brazil's former president Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has received the first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine at a drive-through vaccination center in São Bernardo do Campo.
I received the vaccine from the Butantan Institute, the CoronaVac. It's exactly the one I wanted to get. In 14 to 28 days, I will have the second dose. I would be much happier if there were vaccines for everyone.
And 1 year has passed since the World Health Organization declared the COVID-19 outbreak a pandemic. Our Brazilian correspondent Brian Meir in Sao Paulo recounts how the country has handled the deadly pandemic over this first year.
Today marks 1 year since the first person died in Brazil from COVID-19. After peaking at a little bit over 1,000 deaths a day last August and September, there was a bit of a lull. But what happened is all of the state governments relaxed on their lockdown orders and quarantine orders. They reopened schools, they reopened bars, and they did all of this at a time when over 500 people a day were still dying in Brazil. And so during the holiday season between Christmas and Carnival, there were huge crowds that gathered at drinking parties and things like that on beaches. And a new mutation developed in the city of Manaus that now seems to be 2.5 times more contagious than other strains of the virus. Meanwhile, instead of coming up with any coherent plan, the Bolsonaro government actively encouraged people to not take the vaccine. And even now, the president is still doing Facebook Lives telling people not to wear masks. And the result of this all is that when responsible mayors and governors try to implement lockdown orders to respond to this new wave, which is now hitting Brazil harder than any other time in its history, with the public hospital systems in 3 of Brazil's 5 regions in collapse with no more ICU units. Gangs of Bolsonaro supporters are threatening local officials who try to implement lockdown orders. In the last 7 days, 1,700 people have died a day on average. There's no end in sight to the dilemma faced by the Brazilian people in the irresponsible Bolsonaro government and the mutations that are developing here in Manaus and now a new one in Rio de Janeiro spreading around the world. And this is why Nicolas Maduro, the democratically elected president of Venezuela, called on the United Nations to intervene in Brazil.
We thank Brian for that report. Brazil's federal health regulator has approved the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine for widespread use, as well as the antiviral medication Remdesivir, the first drug for patients hospitalized with the virus. This after the country reported a new single-day record of COVID-19 deaths.
The benefits outweigh the risks, and the data support the registration of the product AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine. We don't currently see any risk to the population's health related to the use of this vaccine, and therefore our recommendation is to proceed with registration.
Ecuador's National Electoral Council has set a limit for campaign spendings for the two presidential candidates who will go into a runoff on April 11th. The limit established for electoral campaigning will be just over $1.2 million, split between both candidates, left-wing Andrés Arauz and right-wing former banker Guillermo Lasso. The Electoral Council explained that the limit on the amount of money that can be spent on campaign events, such as rallies, is over $2.9 million, corresponding to 40% of the amount set for the first round. According to the electoral schedule, the campaign will begin on March 16th and end on April 8th. Wildfires in Argentina have left at least one person dead and 11 missing, according to authorities. The fires that hit the Patagonia region have led to dozens of people having to be evacuated, while initial reports say over 200 homes have been destroyed. On Friday, firefighters finished extinguishing the flames in the Andean region, located almost 2,000 kilometers of the capital, Buenos Aires. During the rescue operations, the remains of a rural worker who had been missing since Tuesday were discovered. The governor of Chubut province has stated that the fire was intentionally started. The Argentinian government has reduced flights from Brazil, Mexico, the United States, Europe, and other countries to prevent a second wave of COVID-19 due to the British and Brazilian strains of the virus. President Alberto Fernandez announced that the measures will continue to be evaluated according to the health situation in the country. International flight frequencies are to be reduced by 20% from Brazil, Mexico, and Europe, 10% from the United States, and 30% from Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Panama. People will also be asked not to travel to countries where the UK strain is present. Controls on travelers arriving from other countries will also be conducted, including PCR tests, a mandatory isolation period of 14 days from arrival. More stories coming up. Don't go away. Welcome back. At least 19 Nigerian soldiers have been killed in the GIDA's attack in the state of Borno. Nigerian security sources have reported that GIDA's fighters ambushed a military convoy, killing 15 soldiers and 4 militia fighters. 13 soldiers who also been wounded in the attack. The convoy was on its way to Kundubali for a military operation against the insurgents when it came under fire. The body of late Ivory Coast Prime Minister Hamed Bakayoko has been arrived in capital Abidjan from Germany. Popularly known as Hambak Bakayoko died in Germany from cancer at age 56. 4 days after legislative elections that went ahead peacefully and handed victory to the ruling RHDP party. Bakayoko died from cancer on Thursday at a German hospital where he had gone to seek treatment. Bakayoko took over as prime minister in July last year from Abadou Gun Koulibaly, who died after returning to the Ivory Coast from 2 months in France, where he had been treated for heart problems. Ethiopia has also started rolling out its vaccination campaign as the country faces a new surge in cases. The Africa's second most populous country last week received 2.2 million doses of the AstraZeneca jab manufactured by the Serum Institute of India and is targeting health workers during the first phase of its vaccine drive. According to the African Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, both cases and deaths have risen by 11% on average each week in Ethiopia. The East African country aims to vaccinate 20% of its population by the end of the year. Ethiopia has so far registered 172,571 cases of COVID-19, the fifth highest total in Africa and the highest in East Africa.
On one way, we are happy that we are being vaccinated today. On the other hand, the vaccine which is available in Ethiopia is not enough for the whole community. So our community has to wait for some time. So it means the pandemic is not yet over. We're going to have patients coming to our hospital maybe for the next 6 months or so.
Jordan's health minister Nadhid Al-Beidat has resigned after the death of 6 COVID-19 patients at a hospital due to a shortage of oxygen supplies. The country's prime minister Bisher Al-Qassani asked the health minister to step down as he was ordering an investigation into the incident. According to an eyewitness, members of the civil defense inside the hospital helped provide oxygen cylinders and resuscitated patients. The man also added that the coronavirus isolation zone in the hospital has just 1 doctor and 2 nurses for 50 to 60 patients.
My father and my mother are in the coronavirus isolation zone inside the hospital, and I was by coincidence inside the hospital. Suddenly the oxygen was cut. When we asked the staff inside the hospital, they say we ran out of oxygen and that they are waiting for an oxygen truck to supply the hospital. We received assistance from the civil defense. Some of them were inside the hospital and they provided oxygen cylinders and they started to resuscitate patients, among them my parents.
In Lebanon, riot police have clashed with protesters who were rallying in Beirut to reject the economic policies of the government. The police fired tear gas to disperse scores of people who protest near the parliament building in central Beirut Saturday amid deteriorating economic and financial conditions in the Lebanese capital. In addition to Beirut, there were also protests in the country's largest cities of Tripoli, Sidon, and Teire, as well as road closures in different parts of the country. Lebanon's worst economic crisis in decades began in October 2019 and has been made worse since the spread of the coronavirus. Tunisia has launched its coronavirus vaccination campaign a month later than planned. The country's healthcare workers will be the first to receive the jab, followed by elderly people and those with underlying health issues. Tunisia received 30,000 doses of the Sputnik 5 vaccine from Russia and is expecting the shipment of more doses in the coming weeks from China. About 240,000 COVID-19 cases have been recorded in Tunisia since the pandemic started, and 8,300 people have died from the virus.
If we want to get back to living a life on the edge of normal, we will have to eradicate this virus, and we cannot do it without vaccination. This is a fact, and it is a reality that should not be denied. So we have to go and get vaccinated if we want to resume our activity, if we want to live normally, because living like this is also stressful.
Thousands demonstrated in the Algerian capital Algiers on Friday to reject early legislative elections announced on Wednesday. Protesters linked to the anti-government Hirak movement defied a coronavirus ban on social gatherings to rally in different parts of the capital. People also took to the streets in other parts of the country. President Abdelmadjid Tebboune set June 12 for the early legislative elections after he dissolved parliament last month. The vote is part of the president's promised political reforms following protests by the Hirak movement that forced his predecessor to resign in 2019. 4 people have died and 2 more have been injured after a military plane crashed while trying to land in Kazakhstan's largest city, Almaty. The military aircraft was traveling to Almaty from the capital Nur Sultan. According to airport officials, communication with the aircraft ceased around 5:20 p.m. local time. During the landing approach at the Almaty airport, the cause of the crash was not immediately clear. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has announced a series of measures which he said it will lift the country's economy, pledging to bring the inflation rate back down to single digits. In an address to business leaders in Istanbul, the president also vowed to reduce public expenses and narrow current national deficit. Turkey's economy was already suffering when it was hit by the pandemic, with the local currency devaluating to record levels due to concerns over economic mismanagement and tense diplomatic relations with neighbors. Annual inflation stands above 15% and unemployment at around 13%.
We will give approximately 850,000 small businesses tax exemptions and lift their obligation to file taxes. Our economic reform package will safely carry Turkey into the future. It includes concrete and solution-oriented policies.
And we're taking one last break. More news in a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. Italy is facing a new wave of coronavirus infections and the government prepares to reinforce restrictions in most of the country. Schools, restaurants and museums are expected to close from Monday in most regions after Italy recorded almost 26,000 new COVID-19 cases and another 373 deaths in the last 24 hours. Health authorities have agreed on new guidelines for the classification for red zones, in which residents are urged to stay home except for emergencies, work and health reasons. Starting Monday, every region with more than 250 cases per 100,000 inhabitants will automatically label as red zone. A British police officer charged with murdering Sarah Everett, who disappeared while walking home from a friend's house, has appeared in court. 48-year-old Wayne Cousins appeared in person at London's Westminster Magistrates Court after being charged with the kidnapping and murder of Sarah Everett. The 33-year-old marketing executive, whose body was identified on Friday, disappeared around 9:30 p.m. on March 3rd while walking home from a friend's flat. Cousins was arrested at his home in Kent on Tuesday, while the victim's body was discovered in a nearby wood on Wednesday.
The investigation continues, of course, supported by hundreds of officers from across the Met, as well as colleagues in Kent Police. I would also like to thank at this stage all members of the public who have come forward with information or support for the investigation, and would use this opportunity to encourage anyone that thinks they might have useful information to give to get in contact with us.
The UK police has calmed down widespread criticism after cracking down on a vigil held Saturday night for Sarah Everett. Police officers were seen handcuffing and leading women away from the hundreds-strong crowd that gathered in Clapton Common in the evening, despite coronavirus restrictions. The official vigil has been called off earlier in the day after organizers say the force had failed to constructively engage on how it could be held in COVID-secure way. Minneapolis City Council has approved a $27 million wrongful death settlement in the civil lawsuit filed by George Floyd's family. This is the largest pre-trial settlement in a civil rights wrongful death case in U.S. history, according to the family's lawyers and results from a federal lawsuit filed in July 2020. Former police officer Derek Chauvin is currently on trial facing murder and manslaughter charges for Floyd's death on May 25, 2020, which was captured on video and sparked outrage around the world. 3 other police officers also face charges linked to the killing. And Floyd's family lawyer Ben Cram announced the settlement and stated the family's position on the matter, noting that it represents an advance for social justice.
It is my great honor to announce that George Floyd's family, our legal team, and the city of Minneapolis and its leaders have settled the civil lawsuit in the death of George Floyd. The settlement is not just historic because of the $27 million paid out, but for the impact on social justice, policy reforms, and police reforms.
A powerful car bomb have killed at least 8 people and wounded 47 in Afghanistan. 1 among the dead and 11 of the injured were Afghan security forces personnel, while the rest were civilians, including women and children. The death toll in the explosion late Friday that also destroyed 14 houses is expected to rise because several of the injured were critical. The United Nations condemned an alarming increase in attacks in the country targeting civilians. No one has immediately claimed responsibility for the attack. Hundreds of mourners in Iraq have attended the funerals of 8 people killed in attacks claimed by the Islamic State group. The attacks took place on Friday in a village north of the capital. Among the victims were a lawyer, a policeman, and 6 members of the same family, including 2 women and 2 women. The Iraqi military said it was a revenge attack ordered by a village resident who had been driven out of the village after being accused of being a member of the Islamic State. Añez attacks in urban areas have since dramatically dropped, but Iraqi troops have continued to battle sleeper cells in the country's desert areas.
Yesterday, unarmed forms came and raided the houses and killed 6 people, 4 men and 2 women. Then went to their uncle's house. They killed 1 person. They moved to their house and killed the 8th person. In fact, 8 people have been targeted. The motives and reasons are unknown. The people who were targeted are simple people, and they do not have any problems.
Pro-democracy protesters have marched in Thailand's capital, Bangkok, to demand the release of arrested protest leaders. The rally was named March Through the Sky the Second and is a continuation of the rally held by Pao Dodin, one of the arrested leaders. 3 prominent Thai pro-democracy figures were denied bail in a Bangkok court Monday after being charged with insulting the monarchy as the government escalates a legal row with a youth-led movement that emerged last year. The protest leaders were arrested in September last year and charged with violating royal defamation laws after holding an anti-monarchy rally in central Bangkok.
Our goal for today's march is to demand the release of our friends, all of our friends who have been imprisoned.
If the police use force against us, we will not retaliate. We only use disobedience. We have no guns and bombs. We have only our smiles and our hands to demand justice.
And with this story, we come to the end of this news brief. You can find this and many other stories in our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.
economist for the Regional Economic Studies